Okay, we'll get started. So my name is Ken Watson. I'm the Makerspace coordinator and technician in the VCAM building. And the Makerspace is a digital fabrication lab. It has 3 printers and a laser cutter and materials for projects, has sewing machines and drills and hammers. And during the school year, it's a classroom and it's a place for workshops, a place for open studio hours. And then in the summertime, we kind of pivot directions a little bit and we think about what the Makerspace can be as far as community and thinking about the regional area. So the Design Plus Make Fellowship is an 8-week immersion in digital fabrication and prototyping. It is a collaboration with a local area organization, and the organization gives us a design challenge that students have 8 weeks to design and prototype. So we worked with 2 organizations. We worked with the Playful Learning Landscapes and with Turning Points, and both organizations were interested in play and education. And so that's what students created, and that they'll show you their objects of play. Before I turn it over to the students, I just want to thank a couple people. We had a lot of visitors throughout the 8 weeks. We had Namisha and Mark and Courtney and Jason and Jenna and Chung and Kristen. And all these people gave amazing guidance and feedback over the last 8 weeks. And I also want to thank Peter, who's the new sculpture tech. He came in the last couple of weeks and really helped to make sure that that we finished really strong. So thank you, Peter. And thanks to our collaborators too, Playful Learning Landscape and Turning Point. We obviously can't do this without you. And just having you there for feedback and to check in with students throughout the whole 8 weeks is incredibly helpful. So there's 2 groups presenting, Team Sun Buddies and then the Wooden Dragons. And the Sun Buddies are going to go first, and then the Wooden Dragons. And the presentations will be about 10 to 15 minutes. And then after that point, we'll have time for questions or feedback or anything like that. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. Looks like somebody hopped on. Did you get that, Peter? Yeah, I think you did. Thank you. I'm going to share the screen. And Julia and Sylvan, are you 2 ready?
Yeah, we're ready.
Great. All right. Okay, are you seeing that?
Yeah, I think it's at the end of the presentation though.
Oh, I apologize.
Okay.
It makes it more confusing for you. I have to start backwards. Okay, you all set?
So hello everyone, welcome to our final presentation for the VCAM Design and Making Fellowship. And if you didn't know, this fellowship was really meant to give us, like as Ken said, like an immersion into design methods, prototyping, and fabrication using materials found in a makerspace. So within the span of a very short and fast-paced 8 weeks, we were given a crash course on all things makerspace, using technologies like 3D printers, laser cutters, and a CNC router, which is like a big robot woodcutter. And along this journey, we were paired with like 2 really amazing organizations who gave us the freedom and scope to work on design challenges. So for this presentation, we really want to go through our work with these organizations and how we conceptualize their specific needs and actualize them into like working products. And I think for both Julie and I think we can say we were both like really grateful for the design process and like what we learned, like what worked, what didn't, and how to collaborate effectively, like really bounce ideas off each other, and like how to make that, like how to like kind of like creatively maneuver past challenges that arose. Usually those challenges included like materials or just like a lack of time, but we really, I think we persevered, and we actually have a team name we call the Sun Buddies, and you'll see how that manifests into our projects. So on the next slide, we can see like our first organization that we worked with is Turning Points for Children, which is like a social services organization that provides resources for vulnerable children and families in Philadelphia. So our design challenges was to create a toy or object of play that could be used by children while parents and caregivers attended services, consultations, and events run by Turning Points. And the idea was that the toy would be centered around the 5 protective factors that Turning Points finds important to relate to both caregiver and child. And these include parental resilience, positive social connections, concrete supports in times of need, knowledge of parenting and child development, and social, emotional competence. And they wanted like a really simple toy that could communicate these ideas or even like start a conversation on their meeting between parent and child. So ultimately, our goal was to facilitate the beginnings of these conversations, but also to like be able to occupy and entertain the interests of children within a wide range of ages and abilities, while their parents were having like sessions with turning points or just being involved in this process. So me and Julia really went back and forth on a lot of ideas, but eventually we thought about how learning these protective factors and looking resources for family is a journey in itself. We wanted to show this journey, which we felt is kind of like going down a track in many ways. So for our toy, we want like where like a marble, like a spinning top, or an object is going down a track and arrives at each of these protective factors as sort of like a destination and accomplishment. And you'll see how that looks in the next slide.
So on this next slide, we'll talk a little bit about how we made this track. So after a lot of experimentation with cardboard and paper prototypes, we brought the design into a 3D modeling software, and what those designs look like are on this slide. So it has 3 different components. On the top left, you'll see the base and top of the track. And then in the middle, there are the tracks, of which there are 6, and then 5 of them have little houses on the sides. And those tracks fit into the supports, which are on the right. So it's actually designed so that it can be easily assembled and taken apart for transportation if desired. So you don't actually need to nail anything together. But you can if you wanted to. And then those pieces that were made out of wood were cut with the CNC router, which, like Sylvan mentioned, is a giant robot saw. And then the houses on the ends, which each of the protective factors on them are laser cut with different colored plastics and have icons that represent each of the concepts. And then the marble or top passes through each of these little houses as it makes its way down the track. And you can see some of these on the next slide. So yeah, these are the houses that have the different protective factors on them. And as you can see, they're simple yet recognizable designs for each of the concepts. So for example, you can see positive social connections, which is the dark blue, has these little happy gears that fit into each other. And so these really just serve as another way of receiving and digesting information for families that are working with turning points, and helps to jog memory about the supports and resources that are available. It can also start conversations and thinking for children if they were to ask their parent, for example, what a certain design or writing on the little houses means. And so on the next slide, you can see the final product.
Yeah, so this is like what it looks like in all. We had like really nice lighting in the background, but this is our picture on the left, and on the right, we have like a short, like 10-second video if you want to pull it up, Kent.
Oh, yeah, it's playing.
Oh, nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's like just the end of it. But like, yeah, it just goes down the track kind of slowly, but like really nice. And like, I love the little pattern for the top that Julia made. She designed it. It was like, I don't know, it's like hypnotizing, I think, personally. And we also have it that works with marbles too. We're actually going to show everything at the end of our presentation. We're going to like stop screen share and like show all the products. But yeah, that's like a little taste of what it looks like. And then we can go to the next slide and show you our next organization that we worked with. So for our second design challenge, we worked with Playful Learning Landscapes, which is an organization that works to transform everyday or seemingly ordinary spaces within cities into areas of playful learning. And they really challenge us to think about places of idleness or places of like the everyday, like a bus stop, a garden, or a supermarket, and find ways to manipulate our environment and things we take for granted in order to encourage like a sense of discovery, imagination, and learning for young children. And they encouraged us to focus on the 6 C's of playful learning, which include collaboration, communication, content, critical thinking, creative innovation, and confidence, and use these ideas to really guide projects that help like children learn, immerse themselves in a new space, and find ways to involve both child and caregivers to like communicate with each other and play with each other and get them both involved. And finally, also create something that a child could come back to and rediscover or challenge themselves if they were to come back like a few days later or a week later, and find a new way to play with an object. And this led us to our next playful learning project. We can see in the next slide.
Yeah, so this is our concept for our playful learning design, and it's called Shadow Play. So after a very long and extensive brainstorming process, and by long, I mean probably about 1 or 2 weeks, but we did have pages and pages of ideas that we had to go through. And this is a very painful but very exciting step where we had to narrow things down and figure out what we could actually feasibly make and bring to life during a short fellowship. And so what we landed on this shadow-based playscape, which was attractive to us for lots of different reasons. We knew that we wanted a design that could be easily integrated into a wide variety of locations, landscapes or playscapes, and shadows can be found anywhere as long as there's sun. They follow us wherever we go. In terms of concrete content and STEAM education, shadows instigate conversations about light, Earth's rotation, the sun, time, geometry, and much more. We also knew we wanted to find ways to integrate shade into the playscape and also the everyday built environment, which is becoming increasingly important with hotter and hotter summers. And finally, shadows encourage imagination. We've all made shadow puppets or waved around tall, gangly shadow arms. And we wanted our designs to facilitate hands-on experimentation with everyday wonders. So on the next slide, you can see our primary design for this playscape, which is what we call the shadow stem, which is a flower that's actually, you can see right behind us, that we'll show you right after the presentation. But the shadow stem is designed to allow for playful experimentation with shadows, light, and making different colors. And so the petals on top of the stem can be rotated manually, causing different colored panels to overlap and create new mixed projections on the ground below. This allows kids to ask questions, discover answers, and develop a deeper understanding of primary and secondary colors. And also, because the shadow moves throughout the course of the day, the structure ignites curiosity about the science around shadows and sets the groundwork for different discussions on Earth's rotation, the movement of the sun across the sky, and time. And this aspect also creates some appeal for older learners who already know the answer to questions like, how can you make green if there's no green petal? Even though it's still fun for us to figure out how to make green, and we do know how, I promise. And because this design is pretty simple, a lot of its uses can actually be determined by the imagination of the users, no matter what their age. So for example, beyond simple displays of light and color, the projections can also serve as the stage for shadow puppet play and productions, or as a starting point for lots of different kinds of games. When we were testing out the structure, we came up with some ourselves. So we were doing some jumping games where you had to avoid a certain color as someone else spun it around. So for us, it's like avoid green and jumping up and down. If there were more of them, you could play some kind of version of Twister, and I'm sure lots of other different kinds of games. And also depending on the height of the user, you could look up or down into the different petals and see a perspective that's all in one color. So I have a picture on the bottom right of the slide that's sort of like a blue world. That was actually during the day. And so that's just another cool feature. And you can go to the next slide.
And this is someone just like prototyping and like the way how we like figured out how to do this. So we really just started with like these like film filaments and gels that like easily mix colors. We were just playing with that on the top left-hand corner. And then we started making like little petals and playing with that. And you can see like, you know, yellow and blue make green. We learned that yellow and red make orange. And we were just like playing with that idea. And eventually like we created this giant stem and we were just like, started attaching our petals. And Julia drew up this really cool picture of like, yeah, this is the concept of these petals like moving around, making colors. And we just got like really excited. I think the prototyping process was honestly one of my favorite parts of the design process. Just like making things, just like seeing what we can do. Doesn't have to work. It's just a prototype. So you can see like our main, I think what really inspired us most was like, yeah, giant stem on the top, on the right. We have, the giant stem with a big tri-petal on top, but also we have on the bottom, more like these singular petals. And that's another concept we've been experimenting with as well, just having singular petals, and also thinking about like, you know, how you can attach petals or just like make them like, I don't know, very customizable. Maybe you can sit on it. I don't know. We were thinking a lot about that. And I think the prototyping process really helped us conceptualize what we wanted for this project. And then you can go to the next slide. And this is really just how we built it. It's a really simple object. Basically, we have like this stabilized base that's connected to like an interior pipe. And that's very like, that's like set in the ground. That would be set in the ground. And we just like cut like CNC cut these hexagons and then put these panels on the side. And that's stable around this metal pole. But I think the meat of it was these petals that we made, these tri-petals. We designed this in like a Infusing 360, which is like this 3D modeling program. And I think the real challenge was to figure out how to embed acrylic panels, which would project the light into these frames. And you can see like, if you like look closely, like there's like these indents, and you can like use the CNC machine to make like indents in the petals. So you can rest an acrylic plate in there. We laser cut the acrylic plates to like be the exact size. Then we put a frame over that. And then I don't know, it's like with the thing, how it works, because the pedals just like move, are not really like attached to the pole. They're just like fixed around it, so they can just spin. Someone has described it as a fidget spinner, a glorified fidget spinner, which I think it literally is a glorified fidget spinner. But kids love fidget spinners, so that's good. But yeah, we just had two fidget spinners just on top of each other, and we just like, you can spin both of them, and just like experiment how to make colors, and you can see like, yeah, our design process and how we built it.
So you can go to the next slide, which is some pictures of the final result for our prototype. So you can see the shadow that's cast onto the ground. The only minor issue we had with this design is that the acrylic that we got was a bit too opaque. So you can't actually make all the colors that we had hoped, but that's a very easy fix. We would just need to get different materials. So we can go to the next slide, and you can see some people interacting with our object. So unfortunately, we weren't really able to put our designs to the ultimate test and get officially kid approved. But while we were working outside of the maker space, different summer camps were walking by. This is actually where we realized that it looks like a fidget spinner, because kids would walk by and be like, oh, look, it's a fidget spinner. And we were like, okay, yeah, kind of. But yeah, they wanted to come try it out. And so we let them, and people were excited about the shadows that was cast, and we were really excited to see people interacting with it. So that was just really fun. And then on the bottom left, you can see a picture of me enjoying the wonderful shade from the shadow stem. But yeah, and then the next slide.
Yeah, we just had like some recommendations for like a final design, or just like honestly like, things that we thought like also work better. We actually also devised like a second shadow stem with like just like singular petals. That would like also, we were thinking about like kind of like a whole playscape of a garden with just these stems, and like you can like see them lined like around like a place, or a public place or a garden anywhere. And the other one has, I think it's a little thinner, and it has like these like singular petals that you can move around. Same concept. I think it's like literally the same build. It just like, I think we ran out of wood at the end, so we couldn't, and also like the time stuff, we didn't really work out with that. But in the ideal world, we would have met like hundreds of these, but we can't. Another thing we were thinking about was like having maybe like this shadow stem be like huge and lofted and like create a large shadow, and then it could be really tall up, and then you actually could have like a lever at the bottom where you can like turn it like a pirate's wheel in a way, and move the colors from the bottom, and then that something on top would shift. We do not have the engineering prowess to do that yet, but that would be like really cool if like we could find a way to devise that. We were also thinking like materially, maybe having like stronger wood. I think it's pretty strong. You can go back to the original. I think it's pretty strong wood, but like we also think like maybe you can make the frames out of metal, or something like that could be like more so your kids like maybe if they want to hang or something. I don't know. We're scared about kids hanging, but I feel like it's like really just a sound, honestly, structurally. So I think it's not really that big of a problem. But also, yeah, also the acrylic thing is a thing we can change to make the colors look nice. But yeah, that's our recommendations for the final design.
So
can next slide.
Can you go to the next slide, Kent? Oh, thanks. Oh, you skipped two. Okay, cool. Thank you. So really quickly, we'll just run through some of the other concepts that we were working with, which we didn't get to fully form. But this is another idea, which is a shadow puzzle. And so how it works is that there's two different components. The first is a puzzle piece, which I have some of them with me here. So they're skewed versions of easily recognizable shapes that can be maneuvered around and cast a shadow on the ground that changes when you move it at different angles. And then there's an outline of that shape on the ground, which is a recognizable shape. And you can sort of see some of those from the pictures on the sides. And we can demonstrate how this works briefly after the presentation. But why it works is that in addition to obviously teaching kids about light and shadows, it requires thinking about shapes in both concrete and abstract forms. So it's playing with three-dimensional thinking with 2D objects. And also some optical illusions. It reverses the usual appearance of shadow and physical object, which definitely flexes some different, it requires a lot of cognitive flexibility. So we're working that with the puzzle. And on the next slide, you can see some pictures of our prototype in action. If Kent, can you just go to the next? Oh, sorry.
I think it's just like a lag.
Oh no, it skipped it again. Okay, cool. Yeah, so you can see some pictures here of how this works. So it's a big piece and you move it around. So the oval fits into a circle, the smush star fits into a regular star, and this angled parallelogram fits into a square. A more complete version of this, excuse me, would obviously need to include some kind of mounting structure, whether that be from above, or it could also be a bendy arm fixed into the ground, as long as it allows for adequate mobility to move so it can fit. And yeah, we'll show how this works after. It's actually kind of tricky, but it's fun. So we have one more slide, which you go to next.
So yeah, for our final part of our playscape, we sought to put like a new spin on a classic and universally like recognizable game, which is hopscotch. And games like hopscotch are really important because they help teach kids about like spatial awareness, counting, executive functions. And so like you have a symbol like a foot, you know, like to put either 1 or 2 feet down in a certain space. Yeah, it's really important for teaching that kind of like thought. And the main idea behind our hopscotch is creating a structure that is like kind of lifted or attached to an object high up. And our hopscotch will like appear on the ground, projected as a shadow. And in this way, like shadow hopscotch will appear at like certain times of the day, actually change appearance throughout the day so that shapes become a little warped or moved. And it becomes like a new type of challenge every time you have it. So like you can really come back to it. We're really excited about this project for the sheer amount of possibility it has. You can really laser cut like any shape and use even different materials like colored acrylic. So the icon, the color and the projection of the shadow can change depending on what you want to teach children. And unfortunately, we ran out of materials to actually create like a structure to actually like loft it up. So we just hung it from the ceiling for our presentation. But yeah, so I think this is kind of like all we have. We're gonna stop the share and like show you like physically how it works right now, actually.
Yeah, we'll do it really quick.
Hopscotch first.
Yeah, so I'll lift up my computer and carry it around. Hopefully you can see. So we have some shadow hopscotch behind me, which Sylvan will demonstrate. Yeah, and then we have our flower, which is in the corner here. So you can see the shadows on the wall. Obviously, this would normally be outside, but it does look kind of cool at this angle with the double lights as well. So yeah, you can, I don't know if you can tell, but yeah, you can see the green. And then this is the puzzle, which this is a tinier version we made just to show you guys. But yeah, I see the oval can be moved around. Yeah, they can all. Square's tricky. But yeah, and then this is, really quick, this is our track.
1 second.
As you can see, a marble goes down nice and quick down the track. But yeah, you get the idea. So that is our presentation. Very quickly, just thank you to everyone who helped us out, and to Turning Points, and to Playful Learning Landscapes, Kent, Peter, and everybody else. So yeah, that's our presentation.
Thank you guys. That was awesome. All right, we'll just go right into the next presentation. Izzy, are you all ready? You should have screen sharing abilities.
We're just going to rearrange ourselves really quickly.
Sure, take your time. A little bit of a quick turnaround because we're in the same room, so they had to reorient themselves. Sorry, I didn't mean to rush you too.
Yeah, sorry about that. There's only one table in here, so. All right, hello. Welcome to our Design and Make 2021 project presentation. We are the Wooden Dragons, and we're going to be talking about the projects that we made with Turning Points and with Playful Learning Landscapes. So Neha is going to start off by talking about our Turning Points project.
We've worked with a group called Turning Points for Children, which, as the other group mentioned, is a nonprofit that works to bring social and health services to vulnerable families. They asked us to build a toy, which Izzy will show, and it's based on their 5 cognitive factors, which are resilience, relationships, knowledge of parenting and child development, concrete support in times of need, communication. So we created a 5-sided puzzle, and each of these spaces have one of these factors. The pieces that fit into each face are pillars of each factor that the child and caregiver should remember. And they each have really pretty icons on them.
All right, so now we're going to talk about our Playful Learning Landscapes project. So when we were thinking about what we could make for this organization, the challenge was to make an outdoor playscape that encouraged learning for STEM and literacy concepts. And so we were thinking about how we could make something that was interesting, that also involved kinesthetic learning, which is learning through movement. We also wanted to promote social interaction between peers and also between caregivers and children. And we also wanted to make something that would promote curiosity, specifically about science and ecosystems. So what we decided to do was make a wildlife I Spy playscape, where there's all these different plants and animals that children are prompted to find around a park. And so we're going to go into depth about this whole process after we talk a little bit more about our inspiration.
So before we even started thinking about creating our products, we focused on choosing learning goals. We wanted to create play structures that were centered around an already existing environment, be it a park or a trail or an open space. We wanted to focus on the importance of education outside of the classroom, as so much of a child's time is spent in independent play. This playscape combines the two, play and learning. By beginning with one root idea, we could create a cohesive body of work that had this underlining learning goal, an environment of iterative and interactive play. When illustrating our concepts, we centered our work around Playful Learning Landscapes, 6 C's for educational play space. We wanted to ensure that each of our products was able to stand up to these requirements on their own to make our structures as fulfilling as possible for these children. Since working remotely, our team was challenged with a unique design workflow. I found myself designing and modeling many of our larger projects, such as the bench and the pyramid puzzle, and then handing the work to my team to bring these products to life in the makerspace. Our designs began collectively through collaboration and transformed into a workflow of cohesive roles for efficient production. We began with a sketch idea, which transferred into a 3D model, as seen above here in the images, to an initial prototype made out of plywood, to the final product, which is a full-scale representation of the bench. This process of creating multiple prototypes was essential in catching any mistakes. For instance, when building the wooden prototype for our bench, we realized that it needed more structural support during the initial prototype design and was able to fix it by the time the final bench was ready for production. By building most of our pieces by hand, we were able to keep our goals realistic and approachable.
So a really important part of our whole design process was all of the amazing technology that's in the makerspace. So we did use a CNC router, which Julie and Sylvan already talked about. And something that we used really heavily for our projects was a laser cutter. So I'm just going to show really quickly how that works. Here's a quick video of the laser cutter at work here. So basically there's a laser that comes out of that little head there. And based on the strength of the laser, it can either burn all the way through the wood to make these shapes that you can actually pop out of the wood. Oh, sorry. That you can actually pop right out of the wood. So you can see that what's being cut out there. Those are shapes that you'll see later on around designs, and this is what was left over. So it's just a really fun and precise way to make these exact shapes that we need out of wood. And at a lower power, the laser can also just engrave really precise designs into wood without cutting it out all the way.
Now we'll introduce each of our products in detail.
All right, so this is my very quickly Photoshopped sort of layout of how we envisioned our iSpy Playscape being set up. So essentially, this is a park that's full of nature, and at the entrance to the park, children and their caregivers would be greeted by this wildlife iSpy signpost that prompts the children to move around the park to look for these particular shapes that will be integrated into all of our products that you can see. I'm just going to circle them for you all so that we can see what's going on. So over here we have a wind chime here, a wind chime over here, 2 stacked animal panels over here, a life cycle wheel in the back, some trail markers here, which are a smaller component, and then a wildlife bench right over here. So together, these products make up our iSpy Playscape, and they're all connected in that way.
So as our ideation phase progressed, we realized that we really wanted to create a space full of interactive elements rather than just one item. Each element adds value of sensory experiences, learning tools, and different ways to explore each piece, guiding the child's attention through the space and connecting them with empathy to their local parks. When the child and the caregiver enters the park, they're greeted by the sign that Izzy mentioned, guiding them between each of the 4 installations and allowing them to seek the animals in each piece. Together, these elements teach kids about different environmental concepts, such as food chains within an ecosystem, life cycles, local wildlife, and fun facts about the animals they might interact with. This iSpy game's primary goal is to illustrate subtle educational goals while still being engaging for children. The wind chimes and the stacked animals are representative of the food chain, with the largest animal being the apex predator. These pieces are accompanied by specific facts about the animals represented, so that kids can learn more about the animals themselves as well as their roles in the ecosystem. These facts will be placed on trail marker signposts that will subtly point towards the animals in question. The bench is also part of this iSpy game, as it connects to real life seek and find. The iconography on the bench corresponds to native plants in the park it is located in and maintains iterative play with its matching game. Finally, the life cycle wheel teaches kids about the life cycle of a butterfly character and emphasizes the importance of sustainability and respect of natural habitats by encouraging children to maintain milkweed populations and even grow their own. Overall, these 4 facets work together seamlessly to create a beautiful art installation, attractive to adults, which entertains and engages children to become more empathetic and aware of their neighborhood parks and wildlife.
All right, so I'm going to talk more in depth about the life cycle wheel now. So as Kit already mentioned, this life cycle wheel helps children kind of read the story of a butterfly character named Maggie as she progresses from an egg to a caterpillar to a chrysalis and finally to a butterfly stage. So I'm just going to show a video on the next slide of this wheel in action. So you can see it starts out with the egg stage, and in the smaller window down there, that's the part that tells the story of Maggie and what she's doing basically each cycle, each stage of this cycle. So kids can visualize the sort of metamorphosis of this creature throughout a lifetime. An additional idea that we have for this that we're still working on, we'll probably work on in the following week, is attaching a box for milkweed seeds to this post so that children can plant milkweed seeds and help sort of revive the populations of monarch butterflies that are currently decreasing in Pennsylvania. And you can also see that those cutouts from the laser cutter, that's milkweed. So a closer look at the design process. So our learning goals for this was to teach empathy through storytelling so that kids can feel connected to an insect like a butterfly, which might not be like the cuddliest or most relatable creature, but by giving it a name and sort of telling this narrative, we're hoping that kids are able to connect with it and learn empathy for their environment in that way. We also wanted to teach growth and aging cycles of animals and how much one organism can change throughout its lifetime, because that's really just an incredible phenomenon that I think is really interesting to people of all ages. And we also wanted to promote habitat awareness, like I said. So in the text of the life cycle wheel, we kind of emphasized how important milkweed was. We have milkweed cutouts on the wheel, and we'll also have the seeds and a little plaque explaining that, oh, if you plant these seeds, monarch butterflies will be able to use that to grow and lay their eggs, and that'll help revive populations of butterflies. In terms of integrating the 6 C's that Kit mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, this wheel encourages collaboration because it encourages imaginative play through the butterfly, and also creative innovation because it provides information through empathetic storytelling and hand-painted images.
Next, we'll go over the design process. The pictures here are for the wheel specifically, but we use this process for most of our designs. Initially, Izzy made this paper prototype and sketches for the life cycle wheel, and eventually made a digital model of it. So we can make a wooden prototype and the actual full scale model or version. And later on, I added details to the sketch and then digitalized it. So it's possible to laser cut all the details. Finally, Izzy made these beautiful paintings, and after a bit of trial and error, glue and screws, made this beautiful final product. Next up on our I Spy game are the stacked animals. These animals show a part of the food chain in a biome, where the largest animal is the apex predator. This structure allows kids to easily see the importance of the food chain in the ecosystem and how it can fall apart without one of these vital components. They also have facts about the creatures represented, so the child can easily learn more about them and how important they are to the ecosystem that they live in. There's 2 biomes in this format, tundra and marine. And there's 6 animals represented. On the left for the Arctic, there's the polar bear, Arctic fox, and lemming. And on the right, there's for the marine biome, there's the orca, the shark, the tuna, and the shrimp. Our next part of our animals are the wind chimes, which also represent the food chain, but this time in a linear fashion, where the apex predator is the very top. And this structure, unlike the stacked animals, has an auditory experience, which draws people towards it. But similar to the stacked animals, they have facts about the creatures and are part of the overarching I Spy game. There's 2 wind chimes in this with different biomes. The one pictured here is a rainforest biome with the jaguar, the toucan, and lizard, and Izzy can show you the desert biome, which is the hawk, the scorpion, and the moth. And to refer back to the 6 C's, these chimes promote collaboration and creative innovation, since the sound and movement not only draw people towards it, but can help with like a memory aid.
Another thing that we added to our I Spy is these sort of educational trail markers. So there are different paw prints or different icons that go with each of our biomes. And one of their purposes is to sort of direct kids towards elements of the I Spy, help them move around the park. But another really important component is that they have these really fun science facts on them that relate to the animals of the installation that they correspond with. So this is an example of our jaguar paw print, and it has facts about jaguars on it. And this is just an example of how kind of we hoped all of our facts would be, which is that they're kind of precise, the precise, accurate facts that that refer to references that children would understand. So that's either referring to their own abilities or their own strength, or encouraging them to jump a certain length or to hop a certain way. And yeah, so you can see back there, there's all these amazing wooden pieces on the wall. And yeah.
So I was fortunate enough to work on the final piece of our Wildlife I Spy for a lot of our fellowship. And the primary goals of this bench was to foster caregiver and child interaction instead of how adults will frequently simply observe children while they play instead of getting involved. So this solves this problem by bringing the play to the space of rest by integrating the two together. The bench builds empathy for the local environment by playfully educating the child on what lives naturally in their parks and asking children to identify and find native plants in their immediate surroundings. Our bench will be covered in laser engraved icons, which correspond to the natural wildlife the park is situated in. So this is an example of the icons that'll be pasted onto our bench. They are different varieties of trees, plants, butterflies, bugs, all things that children could easily find and very clearly identify throughout their parks and are interchangeable depending on whatever park this bench might be located in, because the goal is to really create empathy about immediate surroundings, about somewhere that children are all the time, and bring to life something that they might not notice as little ones. So the bench really highlights natural surroundings by bringing attention to often overlooked thriving wildlife in local parks and asking the child to seek and find some of these plants and animals. This creates empathy for a child's local environment as they grow greater interest and connection, and encourages further care and attention to the places that we live in to maintain their integrity with thriving ecosystems. The bench also includes a fun matching game which captivates children longer and provides ample time to foster educative communication with the caregiver that is spending time with them. The bench is easily customizable with interchangeable icons for the location that it's in. It's made from a CNC routed boards and laser engraved icons, but it's friendly for easy and fast assembly, as well as the simplicity of its design leans into not necessarily needing a CNC router to create this, as the major parts of the bench can be hands-on. It also doubles as an artistic installation for adults, as it's both attractive to children and adults, as an inviting place to rest and an engaging play space for children. While all the 6 Cs were emphasized in the production of this bench, communication and creative innovation were at the forefront, with child and caregiver interaction being the priority of this bench, and an empathetic connection to the local wildlife being its main learning goal.
So just to sum up how our whole playscape relates to our learning goals and the 6 Cs. So throughout all of our installations, we've really tried to cover these bases of teaching the natural cycles of life, relationships between predators and prey, the importance of natural habitats, as well as environmental empathy. All of our pieces are actually all of our pieces are really easily reproducible. We have all the files ready to go, and they can be laser cut or CNC cut in any makerspace that has this technology. And all of our installations, as we've already mentioned, integrate all 6 of the 6 Cs. Yeah.
Thank you again so much for listening to our presentation. We are so grateful for the opportunity to work with Playful Learning Landscapes and Turning Points to learn so much about the design process and production process. And we are thrilled at the prospect of our ideas coming to fruition in real life. Thank you again for listening.
Awesome job. Okay, hold on. I'm curious with the last group, if you could show the chair a little bit more with the camera.
So there you can really see how our icons are attached to the bench. It's about big enough for about one adult to sit on, and it also utilizes those spacers we mentioned in the beginning of our presentation. It's again like a really organic structure that fits seamlessly into any environment that it's placed in, as it's both a beautiful piece of art and a very functional structure.
Thanks for that demonstration. Any questions or comments or feedback from the audience?
I can ask a question. I'm curious if any of five of you had zero experience in the makerspace before starting on this project, or if you all had some kind of experience working in the space. Did anyone have no experience? Julia. Okay, so several of you.
Yeah, I think Kit and Sylvan, were the only ones who had worked in the makerspace before. You did the skate box. Sylvan made an object for skateboarding. And then, yeah, I think Kit was in Kent's object of play class. But other than that, everything was new to us and even for them.
Yeah, I learned like a ridiculous amount of stuff, like 3D printing. I didn't know I could possibly do that in my lifetime, but I can. We're in the future now, right now. Yeah, you just like learn a lot. Like laser cutting was really cool. 3D print. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff you learn in the makerspace.
Really well done. I enjoyed hearing about all of the projects.
We can also accept any criticism anyone has, if that's why it's so quiet.
I will say that these are they're so impressive. I loved hearing about all of them, and it was such a pleasure to work with you all. And I wonder if you could reflect maybe on maybe the trickiest conceptual part of the whole design process. So I mean, certainly there are some practical considerations and some roadblocks that I think you all ran into along the way. But you know, what was perhaps the trickiest and or the most rewarding part of that sort of design conceptualization process for you all?
I know for me, the trickiest part was being remote for this session, because a lot of my products I wasn't physically building myself. So it required a lot of translation from ideas that were pretty lofty in my head to a really realistic conception. And so I found myself working most frequently in 3D design because that is something that translates pretty literally to real life. But yeah, that was definitely the most tricky part, but I think we worked around that pretty well for our group.
I think for me, it was like the sheer like speed of this process. Like, you know, I think we talked to some other designers and like they're talking about how like design, like it takes like months to years to like do products. Like we were working really fast. Like 8 weeks is like a lot of like, and we were just going through it. So I think like the process of like just constantly like being like, you know, like putting out ideas and going back and forth with each other was honestly really fun. I felt like a little bit of pressure, but then also, I don't know, just the idea of collaboration was like, as something I learned how to collaborate in a new way, I think, which is really cool. And just the idea of like, yeah, bouncing ideas off each other, seeing what works, what doesn't, physically like playing, which is a new form of collaboration. It's really like, yeah, gratifying. But yeah, just making products like fast was like something I had to really adjust to. Because yeah, we just made a prototype in a day, and we just like see like, does it work or not? So we were going back and forth a lot. So I think the time was something that was interesting.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It was a really, really, really quick process. I also think another thing that was difficult for us was transitioning from the ideas phase where everything is possible. We have all the time in the world and we have all the materials and everything like that. And then being like, okay, how are we actually going to make this as a physical object? Because then you start having to be kind of brutal with your own stuff and it's hard to see some things go, but then it's really, really cool and rewarding to have something go from an idea to something that you can look at and interact with. So I think that, yeah, that was the other thing we were talking about.
Hey there, great job, everybody. I'm just curious, you talked a little bit about prototyping. What kind of materials did you use for that? And that's just sort of a general question for both teams.
Yeah, so we did some paper prototyping. There's this sort of like something in between paper and cardboard that's in the makerspace that's really easy to paint on and just tape together. And then the next step of prototyping would be sometimes laser cutting on 1/8 inch thick plywood. I think that might be what Sylvan is holding. That's what that's made out of, right? Yeah.
These are actually laser cut, but yeah, we all used the cardboard stuff for the first phase and then made smaller versions with like very thin wood from the laser cutter.
Yeah.
And the one thing I'll say about this experience is that this is the second time we've done this fellowship, but in many ways it's the first time because last summer was all remote, and so it was a fellowship as well, but it was a very, very different experience. And you know, Kit can kind of speak to the design experience remotely and how that works, and she did a great job of talking about that during her presentation. But it's kind of interesting, but it also presents a lot of challenges. But the fact that we got to be in person and just got to spend 8 weeks making things was when Laura McGrain, who's the director of ECAM, and I were kind of brainstorming what this fellowship could be. That was like the main thing to me, was just like, I just want students to be in the space and using the technology and just giving them like prompts and just letting them run with it. So just getting that experience was really exciting. And to speak to some of those things that I think Julia and Neha mentioned earlier too, that it's a mad dash. 8 weeks is not a lot of time. I think that's just that there's something kind of like a call to action where you don't have a lot of time too. That's really fun. But and I also think there's like kind of no way around this sort of feeling like we just have to get it done. We have to move, because at the very beginning you feel like you have all the time in the world. And I did too. I thought like, oh man, we got 8 weeks. And then like halfway through, I was like, oh no, it's almost over. But I'm just so blown away by all the things that everybody made and did in a really short amount of time. It was really, really cool to see. If there's one more comment in the chat, we probably have time for one more question or comment. If not, that's okay too. Okay, we got a question. What inspired your structures and where are you going next, from Lexi?
I can probably say for myself, we're working on the bench a lot. I actually saw at the Philadelphia Flower Show, there was these beautiful array of CNC routed benches, and I knew I could work with that, and I could make something that is interactive and both beautiful for a landscape and easy to put together. And it's obviously not an original idea, but I was able to create my own designs for the bench. And we really, again, like, our group is really conscious about sustainability and the natural environment. And so we really wanted to combine those ideas into a really wonderful playscape with a lot of learning goals about, you're playing in nature, but let's maintain the nature. Let's keep this nature for years and years to come. And so, yeah, so we really want to focus on our local Philadelphia wildlife and how we can help foster those environments. So, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so it's 11 o'clock. So thanks everyone for coming, and hope you enjoy the rest of your Fridays. And I think I'm taking everybody else to pizza. I think that's the next step for the teams. So good work, everybody, and amazing job. Yeah.
Could I stay on and chat with your teams for a second?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody. Pleasure working with you. Congratulations.
Yeah, great job.
Thanks, Rachel. It's great working with you both.